So hi everyone, thank you for joining us today.
Perfect.
Thank you, John, for speaking. It's great to have you at another event. So John Hotson is a speaker, entrepreneur, writer, and senior advisor to business owners. John has started and run 7 companies, advised business executives, in dozens of industries, and given hundreds of presentations and speeches. John formerly ran a business unit at Nortold Networks and is a founding partner at Business Transition Alliance. He works with business owners who are growing their businesses, exiting or stepping back from the day-to-day operations to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Thank you again for speaking today, John, and good luck with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Alex, and welcome everyone. I'll just put a screen up here with some slides. Looks like we're good to go. Yeah, as Alex said, my business is business transition, and I work with a company called Transitions Alliance, Business Transition Alliance. We work with business owners that are getting their business essentially ready for a transition, specifically a sale. And what we're going to talk about today is how you should be looking at your business from the perspective of a potential buyer, and perhaps what we have learned through the experience of 2020 and how that may impact how you look at your business. So what have we learned from this whole thing that happened in the last 10, 12 months? It's primarily boiled down to a couple of basic things. And the biggest one of all is that business value fundamentals are more important than ever. It has been this in the past, and it's gone to even more in the future, that the fundamentals of the value of your business are going to be important. And how can you get at those business value components is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to cover off how the pandemic has impacted business value. I want to go back then and kind of take a high-level view of what value really is. What are the top value drivers in your case? What are outside people who are considering looking at your business, what do they see as being the value drivers in your business? What impacts that value, and where do you start in terms of maybe changes you need to make or decisions you need to make in terms of improving the business? The big question that everybody's asking, is this a good time to sell my business? I'm sure you're reading a lot about it, and there's a lot in the news about both sides of that. And we'll talk a little bit about it. I've got a case study with the client that we've been working with that I want to take you through, and covered off the timing on the whole issue of selling a business. We're going to switch this over to you and get a sense of why you are here and why you're spending your time at this conference today and what's important to you, and what you should be doing in terms of taking some maybe next steps and starting to rebuild some of the value aspects of your business. And we'll wrap up by telling you a little bit of how you might be able to do that, or how we might be able to help if that's relevant. So let's talk about value. And how has the recent pandemic impacted, or is it impacting business value? Well, I wanted to talk to some people who are, on the front lines of this whole thing. So I reached out to my colleague, Colin Walker, and Colin is the managing director of Crosby, and they're an M&A organization in Toronto, work across Canada. And Colin's comments were this, is that M&A hates uncertainty. And through this whole pandemic, we saw a shift both from a seller's market to being more of a buyer's market. Valuations were down and at the start of all of this, but they appear to be sort of stabilizing. And most recent data that I've looked at as recently as this morning says that transactions are starting to rise up again. But financing is much more difficult from both banks and from private lenders. Colin goes on to say that thoughtful preparation is what's critical, and sellers need to improve the business and create the best ingredients they can to take on, to go into an M&A process. So what does all that mean? And I've underlined the concept of improve the business because that's what we're going to talk about here today, the things that you can do to improve your business. I also spoke with a colleague called Melanie Russell. And Melanie is the president of Kalex. uh, valuations. And she's definitely on the front lines of valuation. And her comment is this: the fundamentals are really no different. Businesses will still be judged on how well you understand your business and how you make money and how clearly you can communicate your value. And do you have a sound and believable perspective of what your projections are? That's what people who are looking at your business are going to be looking for. So to summarize, what people are looking for from an outside perspective and what the knowledge that they're carrying into this conversation that they may be having with you is that it still tends to be a buyer's market. There's a lot of money on the sidelines, people looking for good deals. Valuations are somewhat uncertain, but strengthening, depending on the sector. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. Financing is definitely more difficult. And that preparation for the sale of the business is very critical, and you need to improve the aspects of the business, which we'll get into. How do you understand how you make money, communicate the value, and make sure you have a believable projection? So has it had an impact on valuation? Yes, very definitely has. And we're seeing some of that in specifics, but things seem to be easing off a little bit. And we're going to talk a little bit about this concept of how you can improve the business going forward. So what are business prospective buyers for your business? What are they looking at in terms of what the top value drivers might be in your business? Well, if at no other time, this has become and still remains the top driver from our perspective. The strong management team is the thing that is going to make all the difference in the world to people looking at your business from the outside. If they can see a strong team in place that has taken part, participated in the transition of this business over the past year, maybe your company has had to do some pivoting and is doing things somewhat differently. What role has your management team played in that pivot? How strong are they based on what they've gone through? And that's what people are looking for when they look at a business from the outside. How strong that management team may be. How stable is the cash flow? This has always been a big thing before COVID and certainly at this point. Can you predict with some degree of certainty the stability of that cash flow in times that have been somewhat uncertain? So that definitely comes up as one of the top value drivers. What are the trends of your revenue? What we're seeing out there is that people are taking a much more critical look at the past 3 to 5 years of revenue in the company, but even a more critical look at trends going forward. And those trends are being examined for their believability to make sure that the business is basing the trends that they are projecting on sound factors. What's the strength of your brand? This is one of my favorites in terms of what's a value driver in this whole situation of transitioning the business. Does your brand reflect where your company has been and where it's come from? Or is it more reflective of where you're going and how you may have changed as a result of all of the issues that came up during the whole pandemic? What are the condition of your assets? If your business is in an asset-heavy sort of sector, and that could be in transportation with rolling stock, or it could be a factory with plant and equipment, those kinds of, what is the condition of those assets? This is not a time when someone from the outside looking in wants to have to invest heavily in fixing up assets in the company. We heard a little bit earlier today about documented processes and procedures. And inside your business, this is essential. If you're going to turn over the business to someone else, and that someone else may be me in this situation, perhaps I'm looking at the business and saying, on day 2 of me owning this business, am I going to be able to operate it in a way that is going to continue to be profitable and driving forward in the way it has in the past? Or are all of these processes and procedures in the mind of the owner that's no longer with the business? Growth potential. Has the company weathered the pandemic and continues to have strong growth potential? Or is it hanging on too much to the way it's always done things in the past? And the last one on this list is certainly an important one, but how diversified is that customer base? So these are the things that potential buyers look at when they're looking at a company. They always have looked at these. These are fundamentals, but they're even more so. And when Colin talks about, fixing up the business, he talks about things like this, and we're going to get into some detail on what this value is. So let's talk a little bit about what value really is. This is a bit of a textbook description of it. Is all forms. Business value is all forms of value that determine the success and the saleability of the company. The success and the saleability of the company. And that boils down to things that go way beyond the economic value, the EBITDA, or as we know it now, EBITDA with COVID having an impact on the bottom line. And it goes into things like the employee value, the customer-supplier relationships. And when people are looking from the outside, they're curious to know what these relationships are like. Do you have a good, strong relationship with your clients? Have you talked to your clients lately? Do you know how they're surviving and doing in all of this? Are your suppliers in good shape? Have you had to extend terms? All of these things represent components of value in the business. Is the business model strong as it goes through this whole pandemic? And is it strong enough to withstand whatever is going to come at us after this? If there's intellectual property in the business, how sound is that? Are the ownership issues clear around your IP? Is the brand or the reputation that you have, because that's really all a brand is what people think of you, is that intact? And again, are you reflecting the future of where you're going, or are you still kind of stuck in the history of where you've come from? Managerial value, are they involved? Are they immersed in the decision making and in the direction that you're heading in? And last on the list, but rising in terms of importance, is societal value. What value does this business contribute to society? And is that a company that I, as from an outside perspective, could see myself being involved in? So those are the aspects of value that are key, and we need to continue to look at. So let's look at it from a holistic perspective, if you will. What impacts value, and where do I get started? I've created this thing that I call the value framework that looks at all aspects that will impact value, and this is what's going on in a buyer's mind when they're looking at a business. All of these aspects, and it starts with the outer circle of this, which is the macro environment of this value framework. And these are all of the things that impact any business, no matter which sector you're in. And it's the macro issues, it's the economy, it's regulation, it's things like weather, or things that may impact the company as time goes on. The case study that I'm going to take you through in a few minutes has been impacted by both the economy, and they have to be concerned about regulation because they're in a regulated, or they tend to deal with regulators on a steady basis. So these are at the outer ring of this macro level of issues that impact value. Closer into the center of this are the things that are in your market. These are specific to you, your customers, your suppliers, the relationship you have with those people, your competitors. So if they make a shift, if your competitors decide that in all of this, they're going to have to adjust their pricing, how does that impact you? And how does that impact your profitability and your projections in terms of cash flow and revenue trends and all of that? That's going to have an impact on how someone from the outside perceives the value of this business. So these are things that you as a business owner tend to think about. Customers, competitors, suppliers. But what's right at the very center of all of this, what I call the micro environment? This is where it's really happening for you on a day-to-day basis. It's your strategy. It's the people that you have in your organization. It's the routines and the culture and the processes that your people are engaged in. And this is where you start in terms of focusing on how you can build or rebuild, in some cases, value in your business. Have you got a strong business strategy? Have you reworked that strategy based on what's happened? Has your sales plan been reworked to reflect where you're going in this new world? Are your employees engaged in making that happen? Again, the case I'm going to take you through next is a strong demonstration of employee engagement in this whole process. Are your processes defined and now reflect where you're going in this new environment? And are your performance metrics aligned with your goals and objectives so that I, as an employee in the business, know that everything that I do every day is taking us one step closer to reaching the goals of the business? So I feel motivated to do my job. And are you getting the efficiencies out of your operations based on partially on your employees being engaged and also being on how well your processes are defined, so that you're not reinventing things and repeating things and doing things differently every time? So that's where you start. Those capabilities and actions are where you start. Let's ask the question, is this a good time to sell my business? Well, I'll give you the answer. It depends. And I'll give you a better answer, because it really depends on how sound your micro environment is. All these things that we just talked about, your business strategy, your sales planning, all your employees being on board and engaged and committed and working together, the metrics that manage and measure how you perform, your employees perform. All of those things, if you're working hard on that, if you have done your homework on all those things, and it shows from the perspective of how smoothly your company runs, then someone from the outside looking at it is going to say, this business is going to be able to withstand all of these pressures that this value framework has and is going on at all times. And so, yes, if you've done that work, this could be a very good time to sell your business. There are people waiting. There are people looking. We get calls, and we're not even in the transaction business, but we get calls from people who are saying, we've got cash, we want to invest. Is this a good time for them to invest? It certainly is, if they can find a company that's done its work and is running efficiently and effectively. Now, as I mentioned, I want to take you through a little bit of a business case. I just want to make sure that I'm staying on time here. That a case study that we've been working on with a client for several years now. And this is a snapshot of where this company was about 5 years ago when we first started working with them. And they're an engineering consulting firm. There are 3 partners. And the partners are owners of the company, and they're looking at transitioning out and retiring over the next 5 or so years. And so they had some challenges that they wanted to deal with. They needed to grow the business dramatically. It's a company of about 35 employees, so they're not a large company, and they had some much larger competitors. The challenge that they had in terms of growing this business was that some 96% of the revenue was coming from the owners themselves. That's a big problem if you're looking at stepping away from the company. The senior managers were just not engaged in doing any of the business development or strengthening the relationships with clients to drive more business. Now, they're very smart people, don't get me wrong. The senior management in this team are, doctorate degrees and engineers and very intelligent people, but they just don't think, or didn't think, in terms of marketing and that being part of their job. As I mentioned, this firm is influenced was influenced by the economy. There was some downturn in some of the sectors, in mining and some other sectors that they were dealing with, so they had to deal with that. And they always have to be concerned about regulation, because everything they do in the company is viewed from the perspective of the regulator, because environmental services are highly regulated. So in terms of the value of this company, they have to make sure that everything they do not only passes and is in alignment with what regulators are looking for, but they can easily work with their clients to make sure that their clients understand how it aligns with regulators. So it gets a little bit complicated for them. They don't have marketing experience. They didn't really have any idea of how to go out, and I'm talking about the management level here, go out and grow the business. They had some very established competition, and their services were not differentiated. They were offering similar services as some of the bigger, larger companies. So where do you start in a situation? Well, it'll be no surprise that you start at the micro environment level of a company, and you start there to build the value in this firm. And that's exactly where we started. Started by talking to about a dozen of their clients in North and South America about why they deal with this company. Of all the environmental services companies that are out there, why did they choose this company? And then we did, and we got some very interesting comments back from those interviews, that when we fed that back to the client, they said, wow, well, you know, we thought that they were hiring us because we were the very best at toxicology or some kind of scientific solution. But no, they found out that they were completely, the clients were completely aligned with the way this company thought, the relationships that they had. The value that they brought to the table was more how they helped their clients get through their applications for their various environmental programs they were working on. Very different from what they thought. We then had the staff do a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats exercise to get them to surface from inside what they felt the strengths and the uniqueness of the business was. And then we overlaid on top of that some marketing information and marketing education, so they understood what this black magic of marketing was all about. And I helped them build out their own value propositions, so that they could now talk about the value of this company from their own perspective, in their own words. Throughout all of this, we developed a brand differentiated. Something that differentiated them from others in the marketplace. And we positioned this on their website and all their marketing materials. In a sense, what we were doing is changing the conversation that this company was having. They were no longer talking about the kinds of things they did and having to compete with other companies who did the same things. They were now talking about the value that they brought to the company. Significant switch in terms of how they marketed themselves. So flash forward by about 4 years now, 3-4 years, they've been working on this. Brand awareness has increased significantly through this new positioning. Revenues have continued to increase, and this last year they did very well, and next year they're positioned to do even better. So they have kept on moving throughout all of this. But the interesting thing and the exciting part of this is the staff is now generating in excess of 75% of the total revenues. That's a huge change from where they were 3 or 4 years ago. And they've developed this kind of marketing disruptor that sells a differentiated value as opposed to just a commoditized product that they were selling before. And the staff had played a key role in developing that. And so they feel very involved in this whole business. Plus, they're now bringing in more than 3/4 of the revenue. They are also being able to attract some key personnel who resonate with this kind of thinking in a company. Just as a last note on here, what did this company do in the last 12 months? It's been a tough time for all of us in terms of having to reconfigure our workspace and how we work and how we think. But they didn't sit back. We helped them develop a series of videos that featured the senior management and talked about their value that they bring to their customers. And these managers are now looking for ways to tell their story. In fact, they've created a course on this that they teach in industry seminars, and they're giving one next month in March that we're working on. It's an online seminar now, but people are signing up to hear about how this company talks about the way they do business. And it's differentiated them that much. And there's a huge opportunity for them to reach out to clients. We just did another little research program with them the last couple of weeks to get clients involved in how they think this company is doing. And as I say, they're attracting some key personnel. So this is the story of what a company has done to build up the strength of their management team so that the executive level, the ownership people in the company can exit the business. And that's how it was done. So let's talk about you. Why did you come to this session today? And what is it that you're hoping that you can take away from it? If this were a person in-person conversation, we'd be going around the room and picking ideas. And unfortunately, we don't have time to get at this on a personal basis. But what I'm hoping you're taking away from this is that the first thing you need to do is to start getting some clarity on what are the value drivers in your business. What are things that are unique to you and that you can be doing in your business that others in your sector perhaps aren't doing. Once you can get that clarity on those value drivers, can you identify some strategies that will help you build on that? And it's a two-step process of first understanding what your core strengths and differentiators are, and then identifying the strategies that will help you explain that and communicate that to others. And that starts inside the company. They use a saying with clients that you can't sell to the outside what you don't talk about on the inside. And you need to talk about this inside the company on a daily basis so that everybody gets on board and talks about the same things that differentiate you from other people. And once that's in place, you can then start to implement some measurable initiatives to build on that value. And that's where you need to be very clear that you're taking a next step of changing the way people think about you and changing perhaps what you're reflecting in your brand. Remember, we talked earlier about a brand being not so much where you've been and where you've come from as a company, but where you are going as a company. And this is a great opportunity if you are in a position where you're starting to change what you're doing in the company so that it will be different and you will appear and can be approached by people who might be interested in buying your business from that perspective. You need to think about that as being a component of your brand and how you need to adjust that. So that's where you should be starting on this thing. There's an expression that you've probably heard, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but it still holds that the second best time is now. So now is the time for you to start looking at these things in terms of building value and the first steps you should take in order to get it ready so that when people do start to look at your company, they see the best company that you can create. So how can you get started on this? I wanted to leave you with something that was tangible, that you could wrap your hands around a little bit. And so I want to give you an example of how we look at this, and you can find your own way to do this, or we can help you do this. Is we create a template. We've created a 17-point diagnostic that addresses all aspects of a business. And it covers everything from financing to ownership issues to your marketing to your sales planning to the future proofing of your company, how well you're ready to go into the future. And we sit down with companies for a couple of hours with the ownership team, and they take us essentially through how they would rank themselves on each of these. This is a complimentary service we have as a means of getting to understand where companies are at and what they're doing, and they get to understand how we think and how we may be able to help them. And we help them rank where they stand on each of these 17 aspects of the business so that they can then focus on the few that they need to address. And here's kind of what this chart may look like when it's filled out. This is one we worked through with a client about a year ago when we started working with them. And there are, in these three columns on the right, it's broken up into the things that are where you're not really at risk. You're doing a good job on some basic aspects of the business. In the center column there of those three, there are things that you can identify that you need to improve upon so that you can transition, so that you can exit the business and you'll get the maximum value. But you can deal with those probably on your own if you just set your mind to it, or you appoint your staff in the right direction and get them working on it. And then on the right-hand side of that, it's what you should be doing specifically to address it, how perhaps you might need some help from the outside. And those are the key things that perhaps we can come in and help you with if that's something that you see as being important. And we'll help you sit down and work through getting clarity on those specific value drivers and focusing on strategies that will build the value, and then giving you some hands-on support in implementing it. So that's where we can help you. If that's of interest to you, please feel free to reach out to me, John Hodson at jhodson at BTA Helps, and we'd be glad to help you if there's something we can do. We'll leave it there, and thank you very much for listening, and wish you all the best in your future efforts of transitioning your business.
Hi, John. I just wanted to come on and say thank you for the presentation. Can you hear me okay this time, hopefully?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I hear you fine. Did you hear me fine?
I can speak fine. But yeah, really, thanks again for speaking at another event. It's great to have you back. And thanks for your presentation. It's really interesting. I'm not sure if you mentioned, I was just coming in at the last few seconds, just from checking on the main stage, but did you mention how people can get in touch with you if they have any?
Yeah, I put up my last slide, had my email contact on it, and if they want to reach out to me.
Awesome.
Do you want me to send you a deck and to circulate? Is that something you want?
You don't have to send us the deck. Actually, we have a recording of this presentation available, so we can certainly circulate that. If you'd like a copy as well, just let me know and I can send you that as well.
Yeah, send me over a copy if you can.
Awesome, yeah, and feel free to just share it. But yeah, thanks again. It was really great to have you back and a great presentation.
Okay. Thanks, Alex.
Bye.